Now, I could just sell them straight away on something that they might want to buy, but that's an amateur way to do things, and that's assuming that everyone that looks at your stuff is a customer. I believe you've got to warm them up and they become customers later, and that actually 95% of people will never be a customer, and that's good. So I'm a little bit quirky. So I tell people that you should be spending most of your time on these platforms publishing content, not hacking algorithms, not updating your bio, not taking photos, none of that stuff. Just actually publishing content. And that's where people struggle because they're like, oh, I don't have any ideas.
Welcome to Entrepreneur's Handbook Podcast, where we share inspiring startup stories with practical takeaways for you, the listener. Today's guest is Tim Denning. He's got over 200,000 followers on Medium, but even more impressively, he's got 388,000 followers on LinkedIn. And he's built an entire business based around this, become a full-time creator, entertained millions of people, as well as created courses that are flying off the shelves. So what he's going to teach you today is how you can use LinkedIn as a platform to grow your business and increase your personal brand, and how to monetize that too. I hope you enjoy listening. Welcome to Entrepreneur's Handbook, Tim. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Yeah, good to be back.
So for people listening who aren't aware of Tim, I don't know where you've been living, but Tim is our writer who gets the most views on Entrepreneur's Handbook. And he's one of the most followed writers on Medium. But it's not actually where you started. You had LinkedIn, you had lots of other places as well. So what I'd be really interested to understand is, what got you into this online world?
Yeah, it's a strange one. I've had a few cracks at it. I was part of a number of startups like in my early 20s. One was quite successful. A few people know the sort of story. I won't bore everyone, but kind of walked away from it and decided it wasn't something that I wanted to do. It was like we're basically importing stuff from China and selling it online. So like early days of e-commerce. So I had a taste of it before, but then I spent most of my career working in finance. So I got a job in a call center, just like minimum wage kind of job. And I was working in a bank. And then I sort of gradually moved up the ranks over a number of years. I started working more with tech companies. And I just found in my spare time, I was writing online and just learning how things worked. And I wasn't really doing it to make money. I was aware of how you could make money. So back then, this is, 2011, so a long time ago, there was AdSense, there was affiliate marketing. You were typically trying to get published on Forbes or Business Insider, those types of places, and then linking back to something that you're doing. That was the typical business model. There wasn't things like Medium or places that would actually pay you for your content back then. And so I did it more just because it was fun and I was doing it after hours. And then one of the very first places I wrote on was actually LinkedIn. So I had articles I was publishing on a friend's WordPress blog called Addicted to Success. And I was like, I want to distribute this content to other places. So I was copy and pasting that essentially straight onto LinkedIn. And through that process, I was like, maybe I could do native content, especially for LinkedIn. And so all I was really doing was just sharing things that were happening at work or that I was learning. A lot of it was kind of self-improvement in the early days. So like back then, quotes was a really big thing. And that was new. Like no one was really doing picture quotes. And so I sort of did a little bit of that. And then it just evolved. I've been on LinkedIn now for 8 years. It's the platform that I like them all for different reasons, but it's definitely one that I like a lot because for entrepreneurship and for business, it's just the right platform. And it doesn't compare to like Twitter or Facebook or any of these other platforms. It's very unique. And the reason it's unique, I figured this out the other day. So all the other platforms, they monetize through ads. LinkedIn has ads as well, but it's very different because most of the users buy a LinkedIn membership. So LinkedIn doesn't need to be successful with ads. That's more of an additional revenue stream rather than their main revenue stream. So that means the quality of content and the interactions and the way the whole platform operates is different because it's not driven by ads. So that's a long way of answering the question. But yeah, been on LinkedIn for 8 years. Started while I was working in my 9-to-5 job, just after hours. And yeah, still on there and still grinding.
And for so long, you were writing just for fun, like you said. What made you pivot towards writing more as a business and considering taking it seriously?
I wouldn't say even now that I'm trying to do it as a business, but I definitely take it a lot more seriously. I think it's just I had a little bit of traction with a few different things over the years, and then I realized, if I took this seriously and I made it a habit and treated it with the same level of discipline that you would a business or a startup, I thought, there's an opportunity to do something really good here. Still to this day, I don't really know what that is, because the problem with the internet is just like there's endless opportunities. You can really do whatever you want. And I haven't exactly figured out what that is. I do run like an online academy. That's one of my main things. And that's something I'm really passionate about and I want to keep doing. But from a writing perspective, whether that turns into, do I want to write a book or do I want to do something like a podcast? I don't know. My advice to people watching this who are in the same position who don't know is just start and see where it takes you, because you kind of figure it out as you go. If I tried to predict where I'd be now, sort of, back all those years ago, 8 years when I started, I don't think I would have figured it out, because technology moves really fast and a lot of these platforms didn't exist back then, and I could never have predicted that they would now. I do think the Web3 movement will be the next iteration of what we're doing. And I think for creators and aspiring entrepreneurs, that's probably the most exciting opportunity. But the crazy thing is it's so early. I just don't know where it's going to go. And it's a bit like the early days of social media. There's like MySpace and Friendster and all these weird platforms that are all dead and were horrible to use. And I kind of feel like the ones that exist in Web3 now are probably the same. So I don't want to back any particular one or get too excited. But it's exciting for the entrepreneurs that are maybe listening to this. We're at the early stages of the next iteration of the internet. So enormous opportunity.
Yeah, and I'll come back to Web3 in a moment. But with the so many different opportunities you have online at the moment, how do you choose which ones to ignore, which ones to say no to, so you can spend more time with the ones that you think are more important?
Yeah, I'm not very good at this. I tend to try and do them all and then do a bad job of it. Same with writing. I tend to write on too many platforms, and it's not the best way to do it. My success in the early days was because I did just focus on one thing. And since I've diversified a bit, that has impacted my results somewhat. So how do I choose? I'm not really looking at for like what's the best financial reward. I'm more looking at like, what do I enjoy doing? What's something where I wake up each day and it's actually fun? And some of the writing stuff isn't fun and some of the platforms. But when I sort of log in each day to, like at the moment for the academy, we're building another course. This will be our 6th one. And it's quite exciting. It's sort of like our little baby that we're starting from scratch again after 9 months, that type of thing. And so that's just really fun. And it's really nice. Like you check your email and you see all the emails from students who have bought this thing that you've created and they've got a lot out of it, and they're sharing their stories around how they're using that thing that you build to actually build their own business or their own whatever it is that they're trying to do. And that's very rewarding. Whereas chasing money online it's sort of empty. It hits your bank account. Maybe you invest it, but it's just kind of numbers in a screen. It feels like if you were a teenager and you're playing a video game and you're sort of collecting like points in something like Mario, to a point, it sort of doesn't matter anymore. And that's how money feels to me. So yeah, to answer your question, I'm more just chasing the things that I get excited about that help me wake up in the morning. That's what's interesting to me.
I think what's interesting there as well is there's going to be so many people listening today who are aware of like how financially successful you've been through your writing. And they're going to think in their heads, oh, if I get to that level, I'm going to be happy, or that's going to fulfill me, or I'm going to have made it. But what's interesting is that now that you've had that success, your motivations are shifted. And even along the way to that success, you didn't care too much about the money side. It was something that happened because you're following what you enjoyed. And tell us more about the course in terms of what inspired you to do an online course in the way that you have. Because there's so many different online courses out there. There's ones where there's cohort-based ones. There's ones where people can just buy it and do it themselves. What inspired your model?
Yeah, I think I produce a lot of free content, but what I was finding is people wanted that next level. They're saying, no, I want to go behind the scenes. I want to see your account. I want you to teach me how to do it. And you just can't do that in a blog post or an article. It's just not possible. So initially it was just launch something small and just see if it helps a few people. And that's all we did. And it was not like massively successful. But then I started iterating, and as you launch more of these things, you kind of figure out like what works and what doesn't for your particular model. And, you mentioned cohort course and self-paced. Ours is a little bit of a mixture at the moment, and it's going to continue changing. Like we've got more ideas on how to do it. But what's different, I think a lot of people that teach these courses don't have any social proof. And so you're learning from someone who is trying to teach you how to hack the algorithm and trying to teach you shortcuts. And I don't really think there's necessarily shortcuts. So what's different with our courses, and I say our because there's myself and another teacher, so we co-teach these courses because we think it's more interesting. I find, so before I started making courses, I did a lot of other people's courses. And even to this day, like if I'm going to launch a LinkedIn course, I'll do the other 10 biggest LinkedIn courses before making mine to just see what the difference is. And I find a lot of them put me to sleep. They're not entertaining. They're not vibrant. It's the same screen for 5 hours. It's very boring. So I was really trying to build something that I would enjoy and that sort of ticked the boxes for what I'm looking for. And, I do think that I have the social proof, but I'm also more trying to teach people how to make really high quality content. And I don't spend a lot of time talking about algorithms and features and how to take shortcuts. And I think that's what a lot of online courses do. For example, when I did other LinkedIn courses, I found they spent way too much time on the LinkedIn profile. And I keep telling my students, it's like, most people are not going on LinkedIn to devour your LinkedIn profile. They don't care and they'll probably never click it. So honestly, if you didn't even have a profile, it doesn't actually matter. And then there's the whole sort of personal branding revolution, which I kind of rebel against because I think a lot of people that want to do what I do, they fall into this like selfishness trap of like it's all about them and their great life and their photos are everywhere. And it just becomes the content starts to feel like an ad. So what I'm trying to change my students is it's not about you, it's about what you can do to help the people that are going to be consuming your content. And I'm sort of rebelling against this idea that you need 1 million followers or lots of money to be successful at it. I know a guy that's got an email list with 200 people on it. He launched the course, he sold someone else's course, and 100 out of those 200 people bought the course. And that's a 6-figure business, right? And that's 200 email subscribers. So this idea that you need to be massive and kind of go big on everything, I just don't think is the right way to do it. What I'm trying to do, but I'm not successful at it yet, is trying to build something where it's not so much about the money, but more about giving me the lifestyle that I'm looking for. And I know that you're big into this as well. And I haven't nailed what that is. But back to your question around the course, I think that's what makes it different. It's co-taught. There's a lot of joking around. Something that we do that's a little bit different is we give away the best parts of the course for free. And I know a lot of people think that's crazy, but we've just found that for our model, that seems to work well because we don't want to try and charge every person to learn what we know. We're happy if just 5% of the audience want to be customers of what we do because they're super fans or they genuinely want to learn and they want that more one-on-one experience. But if that's not you, most of what we do is free. We have a rule like we don't do sales emails because we hate them. We don't do sort of clickbaity, 24 hours and it's all going to go away type thing. We don't really like that. A lot of the not sales emails, a lot of the emails telling people about the course, they got memes. There's one of me like trying to swat a fly. There's just, it's entertaining, it's fun. And I think that's been sucked out of the online course world a little bit. And we want to change the model. We want to have some sort of accountability feature in there, which we haven't figured out yet. I think half the fun with these courses is the people that you meet in the community. So we have a community for each of our courses. So yeah, I'm waffling a little bit, but it's just not something that I've seen anywhere in the market. And I'm just trying to make it very different and back it up with social proof and make it real and genuine. And so people can actually get results rather than a whole bunch of fluff that in the end people can't execute on. That's what we're aiming for.
Yeah. And you mentioned how you give away the best content for free. And you've mentioned a few tips earlier on about how you shouldn't focus on your profile because it's the same to me. If I see somebody, I'm only going to click on their profile if I'm very dedicated towards a particular action. So if I'm going to interview somebody for the podcast, I'll go to their LinkedIn profile. If I just see them on my feed, I'm probably not going to go to their profile. What other tips do you have like that? Do you think people listening today could go and apply to their profiles or to their content today and it will help them to find people that resonate with their ideas and what they stand for?
Yeah, so I tell people that you should be spending most of your time on these platforms publishing content, not hacking algorithms, not updating your bio, not taking photos, none of that stuff, just actually publishing content. And that's where people struggle because they're like, oh, I don't have any ideas. And I get this all the time. So the last few weeks I've answered so many of these emails, I feel like I've really found the sweet spot of like where people struggle. So I give you a classic example. I had a lady, she's a yoga instructor. She wants to go on LinkedIn and she's not really sure how to go about it. Now, I understand the frustration because if you go on and start posting content about yoga on LinkedIn, not saying it wouldn't work, but like you'd have to be really clever in how you do it for that to cut through. And it's because people are going about the wrong way. They're saying, what's my business do? And then how do I tell everybody on LinkedIn about my business? And I'm like, no. So you're a yoga teacher. That's great. But we're not on there because if we just promote your business, all we're doing is throwing ads in people's face. And we know that that's low value content. Because if you think about what an ad is a piece of content that you really don't want to consume. You're forced to consume it, but you don't want it. Whereas like high quality content, you're consuming it of your own free will, right? So there's a difference. You've got to understand the psychology. So with her, I'm like, look, people are naturally, if they like what you're doing on LinkedIn, they're going to see your headline. So not your profile. The most important part is the profile picture, the name, and the headline that goes underneath that basically tells people what you do. That's what matters, right? And that headline for her has yoga teacher in there. So if you're publishing great content on LinkedIn, people are going to see that you're a yoga teacher. And then those people that are into yoga or want to get into yoga are going to self-select. And they're going to click on your profile or they're going to find a way to connect with you. Now, you've got to make that process easy, right? And so one way you do that, and we're sort of getting into a pretty advanced tip here, but in your LinkedIn profile, there's an ability to turn on a featured section. Now, what a featured section is, it's really simple. It allows you to link to a landing page or a website that you own and not be penalized by LinkedIn for doing so. It's your one chance to send people to something. And so, for me, if you click my profile, you'll see that I have a ebook. It's featured in the profile. If you click it, it takes you to a landing page outside of LinkedIn where you can get that ebook. That's what I want people to do. That's the action. Now, I could just sell them straight away on something that they might want to buy, but that's an amateur way to do things, and that's assuming that everyone that looks at your stuff is a customer. I believe you've got to warm them up and they become customers later, and that actually 95% of people will never be a customer, and that's good. So I'm a little bit quirky. But back to what you can do to improve your LinkedIn presence. So you need to publish content every day. You're a yoga instructor. What I told her is like, talk about meditation, but talk about it in relation to work. This is where people stuff up. They just randomly throw stuff on there about self-improvement. You've got to tie it back to what's LinkedIn about: business, work, career. And now people overthink it. I'll give you a great example of how to do it. I posted something about getting married, right? Now, if I just put I got married today, that will be a Facebook or an Instagram post. But all I had to do to make that LinkedIn friendly and to understand the nuance of the platform was say, I took a day off of work to get married today. See how I tilted it to the platform? Because I bothered to understand what is LinkedIn about, what do people care about. Just by adding that tiny little bit in, I have free reign now to go talk about my wedding, even though technically that's not how you should be talking about stuff on LinkedIn. So that's one example of like how you could tie it in. So you got to tie the content into the platform. You're a yoga teacher, so you don't have to talk about yoga. Your ideas should be around like telling stories from your life, tied back to career, talking about work, talking about money, whatever it is that you're interested in, and then gradually sort of weaving in what your business does, but without making it overly obvious and salesy, right? And so think of the lifestyle of someone who's into yoga. Potentially they meditate, they're maybe into self-improvement, they're into mindfulness. So there's your topics, right? They're topics that are around what your business does as opposed to exactly what your business does. And so it's just getting smarter around like, what can you talk about? And I find the best way to do that is to go on LinkedIn and try and find people similar to what you're doing and see how they do it. So I follow a few guys on LinkedIn who do personal finance. And that's not a topic that's traditionally does very well on LinkedIn, but these guys have found a way to angle the content so that it works. So I say to people, like, you've got to understand with every platform the nuances. You don't just go on and did what you did with Medium and do it on LinkedIn. And I see Medium writers do it all the time. They just copy and paste their article for Medium onto LinkedIn and go, oh, why am I not getting 1 million views? Because what works on Medium and the way that Medium works is different to LinkedIn. So Medium has tags. LinkedIn has hashtags, but nobody uses them. So there you go. There's a nuance. Just that little thing. If you publish stuff with hashtags, you're misunderstanding the platform that you're writing on. So there's some of the things that we teach in the course, and it takes a fair bit of pushing people for them to really understand those messages and actually have some sort of success on the platform. But that's kind of like at a foundational level what we're trying to get people to understand.
And along those lines, when you talked about it matters who you follow as well, because one of the problems with LinkedIn, I think, for many people who are starting on there, is that they start off with all of their school friends on there, all of their university friends, everybody they've ever worked with. So it means that their feed isn't necessarily the type of content which they want to create. And it can lead people down doing things that aren't necessarily going to help them grow as a creator. And it's something I've done with Twitter recently, where instead of having a feed which I follow, I've got the different lists of people that I consume their content because they're in a similar niche to me, so I can understand what they're doing. And that's something you'd advise people to do on LinkedIn too, is to have separate lists, or I'm not sure exactly how you do on LinkedIn, but to have these lists of people who are doing well on LinkedIn and whose message is similar to yours, if not too similar, so that you can then model yourself on them, at least at the beginning, just to get yourself going.
Yeah, that's exactly what you do. At the start, you just want to have people that you can be inspired by. And then, like for me on Medium now, I don't really need to do that anymore, but I did in the early days. The key is not to copy, obviously. It's to just be inspired and see, what are the things that they're doing that might be different to you. So the way you do it on LinkedIn, they don't have a fancy feature like lists. You just basically bookmark the people that you want to follow. I do the same as you on Twitter. I use the list as well, but I use a tool called Tweet Hunter. And what Tweet Hunter does is basically you tell it like what are the niches that you care about, and then you can manually add people in there. And basically the AI essentially is pretty clever, and it recreates a news feed that's solely based on what you do. And it even like allows you to engage with those people directly through there. So I use that more than actually the Twitter platform because it's a bit too noisy. But yeah, back to your question, that's what's important, is being inspired by other people who, the key point is what you said, that are actually doing well on the platform. Don't be inspired by people who are doing it badly. Learn from the people that are doing it well, right? And the hard part on LinkedIn, if I'm being honest, is not a lot of people do it well, unfortunately. There's a few people that have kind of a million plus followers, but they're more what I'd call the Instagram influencers. They're, selfies of themselves on private jets, all that kind of stuff. There's always an audience for that, but that's probably not the type of account you want to imitate.
And you've done well on multiple platforms, obviously. So Medium, LinkedIn, Twitter, but you've also got a huge email list. And as we both know, the email list is the people that you can always contact. Whereas with other platforms, you never know what's going to happen. You could get banned. You could suddenly have everything switched off for you. But with an email list, there's always people you can contact. And how have you grown that list? So you mentioned before that you've got the ebook in your LinkedIn profile. But what other methods do you use to, one, grow that list, but also keep people on the list and keep them retained?
Yeah, there's a lot of work that goes into it. I originally used Mailchimp, and they banned me for life. You can read about it on the internet. They would never tell me why. I think they have very stupid policies around you're not allowed to talk about making money online. You can't talk about affiliate marketing if you read in their terms and conditions. And I think I accidentally violated one of them, but they just basically banned me. So I ended up on ConvertKit. I think the software you choose is really important, because how effective those email addresses are that you collect kind of does have a fair bit to do with that. ConvertKit is expensive, but it is, in my opinion, is the best option. If you can't afford ConvertKit, I like Substack as well, just as an easy, free way to collect email addresses. And Substack comes with a landing page as well. You can't, unfortunately, do like freebies like ebooks and email courses. So in my experience, it won't convert as well, but it's still a great way to begin. So how do I grow the email list? It's just publishing content. It's trying to publish the highest quality content that you can, because if the content is good, then people will want to join the email list to get more of it. It's something I'm rehashing at the moment. I'm redoing like how I do newsletters and how I engage with people. But typically what I'm doing is I'm curating what the best things are that I've seen for that particular week. I'm normally just serving up like what my most engaged posts are for that week, because I have data that tells me if 100,000 people read that article, if I send it to my email list, they're probably going to find that valuable. So I make a lot of decisions that are data backed. I don't guess. I use the A/B feature a lot with email lists. So I don't want to guess on the subject line. I want to make sure that I've chosen the right subject line that motivates someone to actually open the email and read what I've got to say. Growing email lists is really hard. After being doing what I'm doing for this long, I should have a much bigger email list than I do. But I've made a lot of mistakes over the last kind of 8 years that have unfortunately stopped that. One of those was collecting email addresses and then never emailing them. So I did that for a few years. That was a really stupid thing to do. Another time was like I was just emailing them, say, once a month. You kind of do need to be emailing people once a week. I've also went through a phase where I was just using the email list to just bombard people with sales offers. That's a really dumb thing to do. People just unsubscribe. I think that you need to have an insurance policy with an email list because unfortunately a lot of people won't open your emails. So what I do is I cross-pollinate. So I have people on 2 email lists, and then I also have those same people following me on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Medium. So if I lose them on one channel, I've still got them on another channel. And that's a big part of my strategy. And it's something that I've consciously done that I haven't seen a lot of people do. The next level to that, for those that want the like expert way, would be to use some sort of group chat. So to get people from your email list into like a Discord or a Slack, so that if they do get sick of your emails and unsubscribe, you've still got them in a Discord or whatever that you can still chat to them. So I'm doing a lot of research at the moment on what the best way is to do that. A friend of mine runs a very successful Discord, and it's got a lot of interesting features. Like there's a stage where you can do like live podcasts and performances and stuff, which is really cool. There's a lot of automation that you can do so that as the administrator of that group, there's not heaps of stuff that you have to do. But yeah, the best thing to grow an email list is just really high quality content, an amazing call to action. And I strongly recommend you pay a copywriter to write your call to action because none of us are going to be good at doing that. And then that call to action needs to lead to a landing page. That landing page needs to be amazing. ConvertKit has those inbuilt for free, so I use those ones. If you don't have that, you can use something like Unbounce, which is like a paid one, but it's super easy to use. And then that landing page has to go to something to motivate me to give you my email address. And so the 2 best ways I've found is either a free ebook or a free email course. You can do checklists and other things, but in my experience, they don't convert as well as those other 2. There's just something about a course and an ebook that is perceived to be higher value. And then don't half-ass it. So, I paid a large amount of money to get a book cover done for my ebook. I think it looks really good, but it looks good because I spent a lot of money and a lot of time making it look good. So if it looks good to the reader or the user, chances are they're going to give you their email address. So if that happens, your conversion rate's going to be higher and your email list will grow faster. So each of those steps, just to recap for everybody, high quality content, call to action, landing page, and some sort of free lead magnet for people to opt into. Those 4 things have to be super high quality, data backed, and ideally professionals helping you to build those things. If you take the time and attention, you'll have an amazing email list. I've only just done that in the last year. Imagine if I'd done it 8 years ago, I'd be Tim Ferriss. But there you go.
Close enough. You got the first part of the name at least. With the email list as well. So you mentioned how you didn't email people for the first few years. And it's something I did myself as well. So when I started writing, it was an imposter syndrome. I didn't want to email people because I was scared about doing it. But then by the time you actually email them, they've forgotten you exist. So then they'll either unsubscribe straight away, or they don't know who you are, so they think you're spamming them. And getting marked as spam, if anybody's got an email list, is a really bad idea. You don't want to be marked as spam by anybody. Because once you start getting people marking you as spam, it's very difficult to recover from that again because then your deliverability will go down. So it's a really good idea to make sure that when you've got somebody on your list, you are emailing them regularly. And if, for example, someone's signing up for a wait list, so people do this, for example, where they're going to launch a product in the future. So the email list is a wait list for when that launches. Then at least you've been very clear that to expect something in the future. But let's say I signed up to email list today, then 5 years' time, I'm doing something completely different in my life, and I get an email from you in my inbox saying, "Hi, do you remember me?" It's like, no, don't remember you. Why have you got my email address? Mark you as spam, and that can destroy your email campaign.
Yeah, deliverability is definitely something to keep an eye out for. I've recently culled a large amount of subscribers who are deemed by ConvertKit to be inactive. I recommend that you do that because I found my deliverability and my open rate went up when I did that. But yeah, it's pretty basic stuff. Like if you're sending emails to people that want them and they're high quality, they're going to get opened. and everything's great. If you don't follow those rules, then it's kind of not going to work for you.
I know you're fascinated by Web3 as well. You touched on it briefly early on. Can you tell us why Web3 is so exciting for you in the Bitcoin and blockchain world?
Yeah, Web3 is interesting. So my problem with the internet is that there's a lot of censorship going on, particularly on platforms like YouTube. These platforms are owned by corporations who don't necessarily have our best interests at heart because they're trying to make money, which is fair enough. But unfortunately, that means that certain things and agendas are promoted when they perhaps shouldn't be. And the news feeds that we're consuming are sort of artificially promoting certain things because of financial benefit as opposed to like user benefit. So I don't think the current model works. I've been banned several times off different platforms accidentally, but it's a bad experience when it happens. And the difference with Web3, I'll just explain in basic terms what it is because most people don't know. So Web3 is a blockchain-enabled future. It started with the creation of Bitcoin back in 2008. So a long time ago, end of the financial crisis. And then it's evolved with all the technologies that have come since then. The basic idea is very simple. Web3 is owned by the users, so there's no corporations that own it. And when it comes to content, the moderation policy is voted for by the users. So if you were to get banned off a platform, you wouldn't just be silenced. The users would vote to have you taken off whatever the platform is. The difference is that everything that happens on Web3 is portable. So if you were booted off a platform, all of the content that you've posted on that platform could be exported as like an NFT, for example, and then imported into the other platform. So if you think of something like YouTube, you could be booted off the Web3 version of YouTube, and then there would be another type of YouTube that you could import that content on, and away you go. So it's very democratic in the way that it operates. So where's it all heading? Look, it's still very, very early. The boom kind of happened about 2 years ago when NFTs and Ethereum took off. So Ethereum is the second largest cryptocurrency. It's the one that I believe in the most. And Ethereum is like the base layer of this Web 3.0 movement. So think of it like the plumbing, and everything else sits on top. Now, there will be competitors, and there are competitors to Ethereum like Solana and a few others, and I think they will all exist. But I feel like Ethereum has the best set of features and things that we need as creators. And so the way it's supposed to work is that Ethereum would be the base layer, and then platforms like Facebook, Twitter, whatever the new versions are of those will build on top of something like Ethereum. So that's where we're heading. You know, I've been following it closely. I haven't seen anything from the creator economy point of view that I think is that usable yet. There are some promising experiments, and I published an article recently on Entrepreneur's Handbook that talk about some of those experiments, but none of them have got significant traction. They're all great ideas with great features, but as someone pointed out to me, none of them have got user growth, which is like the missing piece. And part of that is a marketing problem because a lot of people still don't understand what Web3 is. They're gradually understanding as, you know, censorship and some of these hot topics, which I won't name, but presidents and certain people that have started these debates. It's becoming front and center now, and I think it's not too far away. But yeah, I'm on all the Web3 ones, and I haven't seen anything yet that is exciting me that I think everyone should drop what they're doing and go and join. I like what's happening on a platform like BitClout, which has been renamed to DESO, D-E-S-O, because it essentially allows everyday people to invest in me as a creator and basically like invest in my business and then get a percentage of the profits in return for doing that. But a lot of people don't know my background is like I studied sound engineering for 4 years and I was a musician for most of my life. And the model for musicians is incredibly broken. And what's exciting is that Web3, that's one of the early problems that they are starting to fix. So that rather than musicians relying on record companies to kind of help them record their music and help get it out there, the distribution will happen via the users through Web3. There won't be that middleman. A lot of people don't know that when your music goes on Spotify, even if you're like Taylor Swift, like 99% of that money doesn't actually go to the artist. And it's a very broken model. And so Web3, that's probably, I reckon, the first thing that'll get fixed is music. And we're already seeing it now, where if you think about a fan base, those fan base are also kind of quasi investors, and they could almost promote your music and get it out there for you using their TikTok and their social media accounts. So it's a different way of building a community and selling music. And then the music can become an NFT. So NFT is like a non-fungible token. In really simplistic terms, what it does is it records the ownership of that piece of artwork on the blockchain so that we don't have copyright issues. Because one of the biggest problems of the internet is I can screenshot your art, or I can download your piece of music or whatever, and there's nothing you can do about it because copyright is pretty hard to prove. And so NFTs solves once and for all that copyright issue that creators face. And then once that ownership is solved, then it means the money that comes from that content can then, new business models can basically be created. So if I know that Amar created that piece of content and then that goes on another platform, I have a track record of everywhere that piece of content goes. And if you choose to charge for that content in certain places, the whole accounting that happens on the back end is very easy, and it happens seamlessly on the blockchain, and that money can be distributed. So you could sell that piece of content over and over, and every time that is sold, a royalty could go back to the original artist. Whereas right now, if you're Picasso and you sell a painting, you get to sell it once, but the 50 other times it gets sold later on, you get $0. So that's a long answer, but that just gives you a bit of an overview as to some of what's happening in Web3 at the moment.
I think that's really interesting because I've been on some of these platforms myself, and I agree with you where none of them are quite there yet. They've got good ideas, but the implementation, the execution, is not quite that mainstream level yet. And what you mentioned there about music going first, that's potentially very exciting because let's say you get Taylor Swift onto this platform, which you can incentivize them with quite well, as you said, because if it gets resold and they get a lot more share of the profits, Taylor Swift has a huge number of fans. So if you get people like this who are then promoting the platforms, that starts to get people on them where they get used to investing in people. And it might start with musicians, but then for wider creators such as me and you and YouTubers and podcasters, at the moment, I think it's quite difficult for some of those people to convince their general audience to join a new platform where they're not familiar with it, because it's going to feel a bit uncomfortable for many people. Whereas once you start getting people in the mainstream to do it, it then can filter through. And it has that connection, I think, there as well, which if it's not just somebody on the internet in an article telling you, oh, you need to join this platform, but it's coming from different people in different creative industries, that could be the trigger to help take this further. And I do wonder because, as you said, Bitcoin started in 2008, so that's 14 years ago. And we've been seeing it as it's going to take off with the blockchain. And NFTs has had a massive impact in the last few years. But it's still, I think, somewhat niche. And I think is one of the keys to unlocking a wider distribution of ownership on the internet is starting with NFTs because it's so visible. But then once it gets to other platforms and other types of creative industries, that's where we could see the tipping point. And it's very hard to make predictions, as you said. So what would you advise somebody right now who's listening, they want to become a creator, or they have their business and they want to make money online or share their message online in some format? How do you know which platforms to go onto? Or is the strategy better to just invest a little bit of time in each platform just so you have, if one of them does take off, you've come in an early stage and you can exploit that?
Let's just go back one step. The Web3, the reason why it hasn't taken off is the user experience. So essentially, how you use these platforms is very different to a traditional platform. The key difference that maybe a lot of you are not aware of is that when you log into a Web3 platform, you don't do it with your email address. And I'm sure most of you are annoyed with username and passwords. In Web3, that doesn't exist. That's abolished. The way you do it in Web3 is you log in with your digital wallet. And the challenge with that is that owning a digital wallet, filling it up with Bitcoin, Ethereum, whatever it is that you want to put in the wallet, or even adding NFTs, it's a really tedious process. And until that gets fixed, even if you want to join, you can't actually sign up to these platforms easily. You mentioned, where should people go right now? Look, it depends on what you're trying to do. I like Twitter as a place to start because it's micro content that doesn't take a lot of time to create. I think that's a good starting point for a lot of people. I like LinkedIn as well because, again, you can create short posts that don't take a huge amount of time and get some sort of organic traction fairly quickly as long as you're creating good content. So they're the two that I'm sort of most biased to because they have a low barrier to entry. And also, I think that chasing new platforms is a bad idea. I have an opposite opinion, which I posted recently, which is I like to chase the ones that are already proven that have the millions of users. Yes, it's very late to start on Twitter, but I just started on Twitter in October last year. So I basically nuked my account and started again. And, it's really hard. I'm finding Twitter very challenging. It's not easy to build an audience, but I like that because the fact that it's hard means that I'm increasing my skills and there's I call it a threshold of participation. If I'm on there for long enough, eventually I will get the traction. Whereas when you go on a new platform, it's easy to get traction early on if you're one of the first users. The challenge is that 9 times out of 10, these new platforms die. And Clubhouse is a great example. All my friends ran on there. They were getting millions of followers and now it's dead. No one uses it. So, that's the danger. I would rather go to a proven platform with hundreds of millions of users. I would put most of my focus there. And then what I'm doing is I'm just dabbling in these other platforms for maybe, 1 or 2% of my time, just in case something, is good. And then I'll slowly, go from there. And that's what I did with Medium. When Medium first came out, I was just a reader for a very long time. And then when it started to get a lot of traction, particularly in Google, every time I was Googling stuff, Medium was coming up a lot. All I did is I go, all right, I'm going to copy and paste my existing articles on Medium just so that I'm there in case this thing does make sense. And then, I think it was like 5-6 years in, only then did I go, okay, maybe it's time to take this more seriously. So I would just be conservative. I wouldn't be running around. I'd be treating a bit like the stock market. You don't chase brand new startups every day as an investor. You probably want to balance. And for me, I like owning things like Amazon. It's tried and tested, makes a lot of money. It does well. So that would be my approach. Yep.
I think that makes a lot of sense because one of the difficult things is we see is like adverts in a way, right, where people promote these new platforms and there's the fear of missing out that comes into play where people want to go on the platform because they're scared that if they don't, they're going to miss out on a big opportunity. But for every TikTok, which now has hundreds of millions of users, there's a Clubhouse. And I'd say it's probably even more than that. It's probably for every one TikTok, there's 99 other platforms that have failed. So if you invested your time in all of these new platforms, most of that effort is going to be wasted in some way. Whereas, like I said, if you go to Twitter or LinkedIn, there's people already there. You don't have to convince them to join the platform, which makes it a lot easier, right? Because if you've got 2 issues for a new platform, is that you have to convince people to follow you, and you also have to convince them to join the platform, which is doubling your work. Whereas if you're joining a platform where they already are and they're already comfortable with that, you only need to convince them to follow you or to engage with you. So it's, especially in the early stages, why make your life more difficult?
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. No, I think you just stick with tried and tested at the start anyway. And then, follow, see where some of these platforms go. Definitely have your foot in the Web3 world because that is 100% where we're heading. Anyone that tries to be a critic and say that it's not going to happen, just to remind everybody, last time I checked, it's a $2 trillion industry now, this Web3. Right, $2 trillion. It's dropped off recently with the crash, but once we hit back to where we were, about $2 trillion is what this thing's worth. So I think that's enough money to put some attention into it for sure.
So it's been great talking to you today, Tim. Where can people find more about you and what you're up to?
Yeah, easiest way is to be on the email list. That's where all the fun stuff happens. So you can sign up if you just go to timdenning.com. On the homepage there, you get a free copy of my ebook. Give me your email address, jump in there, and you'll get all the good stuff emailed to you every Friday. So I usually send out like my best piece of content, the highest performing tweet, and just other stuff that I've kind of curated that I've found on the internet that I think people will love. So it's kind of based around sort of little bit of self-improvement, a little bit of making money online, bit of career stuff, and some content creator / writing stuff. So a mixture of those. So yeah, timdenning.com. Last name's DENNING.com.